If I had to live my life without you near me, the days would all be empty, the nights would seem so long. My mother was pregnant with me and she fell, went to the doctor. He said, look, you're going to lose this baby. Sorry. And then she went back to the doctor like a week later. And according to him, that it was a miracle that everything had healed itself. And after that happened, my father was literally going to church almost on a daily basis in the morning before he would go to work. My luck was entering the Brown Bags to Stardom Talent Contest, winning that. I was asked to do a recording as part of the prize. The program director at I-94 at the time, Jay Stone, he said, Glenn, I think you should re-record That's Gonna Change My Love For You. So once I sang the song in front of millions of people, the song started to explode and it reached number 12 on the chart. We signed to Polygram Records and it went right to number 1. Norway went to number 1, then Sweden number 1, Denmark number 1, Finland number 1, and it's just going number 1 everywhere else under the push of the major recording label. My first day of work at St. Louis, and the CFO said, I quit and we don't have enough money for the next payroll. And so it was a challenge right there. Becoming a leader is very tough. There's a lot of decisions that we make where other people may or may not have all the information we do. And then you can't ever make a decision that everybody agrees with. If you want to make a difference with a large group of people, then I think that's where leadership comes in. In education, we have to teach kids to get to a point where they can create. That's what causes people to be successful in life, to find purpose in life. It wasn't until I became a parent that I realized that love is stronger than survival, because I would step in front of a train for my kids. So I think people see the powers that come into play on earth. But of all the powers, clearly, love is it. And love is manifested, I think, in creation.
Greater Good Radio, Connect, Learn, Heal, and Grow is brought to you by Brain Gain Hawaii, a boutique executive recruiting, career development, and coaching firm. Learn more at braingainhi.com. Welcome to Greater Good Radio. Today's guest is Dr. Glenn Medeiros, the president of St. Louis High School.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's wonderful to be here. I look forward to speaking with you today.
Are you better known for being like a Bruno Mars before Bruno Mars, or are you more known for the St. Louis?
You know, I think today I'm more known as the president of St. Louis School, but for most people outside of Hawaii, I'm still known as the singer of Nothing's Gonna Change My Love For You, basically. Mm-hmm. Some people remember the song that I did with Bobby Brown, but for the most part, yes, I'm that person that sang that song in the 80s that became a big hit.
So when somebody meets you for the first time now, how do you introduce yourself?
Just say, hi, I'm Glenn. Nice to meet you. And people will say, hey, do I call you Dr. Medeiros or what do I call you? And people in general tend to be very, very respectful. But it all depends who I'm speaking to. Everyone treats me a little bit differently depending on where I'm at and who I'm speaking to.
If you had to look back on your whole life right now, what would you say you're the most proud of?
I'm most proud of being a father to my 2 children. I can't call them children anymore. They're 23 and 22. But my son, I should say first, he's a little older. He's working as a civil engineer now, and I'm really proud of that. He got himself a nice scholarship at UH Engineering School after graduating from St. Louis School. And my daughter is in her last 6 months of law school. She did really well at Punahou and graduated from Notre Dame University in the 3 years, and she's now about to get her law degree, and she's still at the same time working on her MBA. So she's got to have another year of that once she's done with her law degree. But really proud of them both. I'm proud of the fact that I've been married for 28 years now. Yeah. And that, I think, is a testament to my wife to be able to be a great source of support, because I've always been a very kind of busy person. I'm the type of person that really likes to spread my wings and try things. If there's something I want to do, I try to do it. So,
where do you think that came from?
I grew up on Kauai. Both my parents grew up on the sugar plantations on Kauai and McBride Plantation. We grew up on welfare. Didn't have a lot, but we did have our own house. We had a lot of love in the house. But I think I grew up wanting to be in a place where, in my life, where 2 things. One is where I had the freedom to do what I want. And I think money doesn't bring people happiness, but it does give you freedom to be able to do what you would like to do. And then the second thing for me is purpose. I've always wanted to have purpose in my life, to help people, which is why I became an educator. As far as singing is concerned, that was simply just something I loved doing and was getting paid for. And that was wonderful. Making people happy with my music was wonderful. But education was always more attractive to me as a way to be able to help people.
Why?
Because I had great teachers, attended Kauai Elementary School, and at an early age, I saw these teachers. They're just like truly amazing individuals, getting paid very little, but just making a difference in these lives. And where a lot of kids, they're not coming to school from a home, white picket fence and everything's fine at home. I mean, they're really the X factor in making a difference in the lives of these children. And I wanted to do that. Like when I saw there was a teacher that I had in the 3rd grade that made a huge impact on me, made me want to go out and sing. Prior to that, I was too nervous to get out in front of anyone, but he identified what my talents were and helped me to build those talents and build my confidence so that I could get out there. And once I was able to start singing in front of others, it kind of carried over into other areas over time. So before I knew it, I started getting involved in student council, different things, becoming a little bit of a leader. And all of that was due to a few teachers that I had along the way. But there were many people along the way that have inspired me to make a difference, basically, in people's lives. So I've always had that drive. So a drive to be in a situation where I have the freedom to make the decisions I want to make and live the life that I want to live. I wanted to know that if I wanted to eat, that box lunch, I can afford to get it. And I don't have to just get the fries. I can get the cheeseburger and everything else too. Mm-hmm. And I remember growing up not being able to do those kind of things. But at the same time, I can't just be looking out for me and what my personal needs are. I also have to balance that with having purpose, making a difference in my life. Otherwise, why are we here? To just kind of get by for 72 years, if we're lucky enough to get that far.
So do you remember a specific time or have a specific story about when you really kind of came to that realization as a child?
Yeah, I mean, the big story was a teacher that I had about 3rd grade. His name was Arnold Meister. He was our music teacher and also our science teacher at Kauai Elementary School. And he was writing a play, and he started, meeting with the individual kids, asking them to go to the piano, see if they could sing it. And one of the kids in there, I remember his name was Michael Ignacio. And he was like this colorful person. Like he was always getting into trouble, but he was funny and everybody liked him. And he kind of had this a little bit of a love-hate relationship with the teacher. The teacher was always kind of getting on him, but at the same time, you knew the teacher really liked him. Anyway, one by one, people were going to the piano. And then, so at one point, there was some singing going on. I knew I could sing, but I didn't really let other people know that. And I just started kind of singing on my own where I was at the back of the class. And he came up to me and said, "Hey, Glenn, you sing." And I said, "Oh, well, yeah, I mean, a little bit." And he said, "I'm going to bring you up to the teacher." So he brought me up to the teacher, and his jaw just dropped when I started singing. He said, "Oh my gosh, I got to get you singing on this." And he had no idea. I mean, I was that bashful kid at the back of the room that, just doing my own thing. And then after that occurred, the teacher said, "Hey, I need you," even before the play started, he said, "I want you to go up and sing for May Day." And I said, "There's no way I'm going to do that. Impossible." And so he started with his own time after school, just working with me, saying, "Come and meet me after school, get on the piano." He would play the piano, I would sing. We'd try different songs. He would try and get the music sheets for the songs that I liked. And even after all of that, I said, "No, I can't go on stage. I can't do it." And so it ended up taking him convincing my best friend to sing with me on stage. And he sang too, but it took both of us singing a duet together at May Day. And that was the first time I'd ever sung in front of people. And I can remember the microphone shaking literally as I was holding it. But the response that I got after I sang was just, I'd never felt anything like that. Like people were really touched. It wasn't like, "Oh, good job, Glenn." It was, you touched me in the way that you sang. It hit me. And at that point, it helped me build my self-confidence. It made me feel like a little bit of purpose there, that I could actually help others and impact them in a positive way. So it was my teacher that got me to that point. And then, of course, I continued to grow. I started my singing career professionally when I was about 16. And even then, all of that confidence didn't necessarily transfer into everything else that I was doing. But for at least on the singing side, my confidence in myself grew enough so that I would start entering talent contests and doing different things.
So singing was kind of where you felt safe.
At home, I was safe singing. Once I started performing and once I got through the initial nerves of just getting up there on stage, about maybe 10 seconds in, once I started doing it over and over again, there was a sense of calm that I'm up here. I feel pretty confident about what I can do and pretty confident about the fact that for the most part, most people would enjoy what I was doing.
Did you have that when you were young too?
At home, I felt, confident about my singing. My mother was a singer, not a professional singer, but she sang. And we'd have this little record player that my dad purchased as part of a fundraising prize that he got. Well, not purchased, but he sold enough tickets for us to get it. And so we had this little record player, and my mother would have all of her records out there, and we do a lot. And so at home, I dance and sing, and I'm very confident. But outside of the home, it took me a lot to get to the point where I could sing in front of people.
So for people who would consider themselves like introverted or shy or so on, then like what could you share with them about your experience that might help them?
Well, I'm a person that I don't like to be alone by myself. But the ultimate scenario for me is to be like maybe with one or two people. I don't like to be alone, but I'm not one that wants to be around big crowds or that. Just so I think I would consider myself an introvert in that case. It did take me a while to be able to get to a point where I could speak in front of groups of people and be comfortable. So I think that sometimes the lesson from that is, I think in life you want to recognize what your strengths are. And you want to build those. And we're in a competitive world out there, and we want to leverage our strengths. But it's also important, I think, for us to take a look at what our areas of growth are and try to develop those too. Because I don't think they're exclusive. I think in life, you want to have a balance of skills. And like for this job that I have right now, as a president of a school that's been around for 178 years with thousands of alumni, if it weren't for my singing, I don't know if I would have been able to do this job, to be able to speak to the people that I speak to be a part of committees and meetings and other things. I might have just stayed to myself. Maybe if I hadn't had the chance to sing, I could see myself easily becoming a police officer or a fireman, because I could find purpose in that and serve my community, but not have to deal with having to speak in front of large crowds or communicate to thousands of people on a weekly basis, which is what I do when I send out newsletters or when I'm speaking at a specific event.
Do you have a story that can illustrate this? Like, what you're mentioning, like a story that's kind of endearing to you that would
In what way? Like what kind of story? I mean, in terms of being a leader, or
no, like how that either the singing kind of played into your leadership role or something, some type of story that gives us a context into this.
I think it was a combination of a lot of different things. Right now, I'm in the process of finishing. I've been actually writing a book. And so I found a publisher. I'm working with the publisher now and editing the chapters. And what I'm finding is that in life, I think it's never one thing that makes that final difference. It's many different things over time. So it wasn't one mentor. It wasn't just Arnold Meister, my third grade teacher. It was my band teacher, Larry McIntosh. It was the first administrator that I worked under that gave me the opportunity to not just teach, but also work in administration. It's just, if I could list them, there's like 20 different people, and all of them different events that occurred that helped prepare me to become a leader. I really think that leadership in particular is probably one of the most difficult things that anyone can do. It's very easy for us to sit back and point the finger or judge. But becoming a leader is very tough. It's a very challenging role because of a lot of factors. But in particular, there are a lot of things that we do as leaders, a lot of information that we know of that we can't share with others. There's a lot of decisions that we make where other people may or may not have all the information we do. And then, of course, it's very difficult to make decisions when you can't ever make a decision that everybody agrees with. So if you want to make a difference in the world and you want to have purpose, you can do so at home. I can be a great father to my kids, and that's it. But if you want to make a difference with a large group of people, then I think that's where leadership comes in. And I've been very blessed in my life to be able to have the opportunity to be a leader at St. Louis School. It's the first time that I'd ever been a CEO of a school. And I did get my training. I did go to USC and get my doctorate degree in educational leadership. I did all the right things, but you don't really learn it until you actually get in there. And for me, I think my learning curve was one that was helped by the fact that I experienced all those things and had all those mentors along the way. But still, every day I'm learning something new, and I can look back and say, wow, maybe I should have done that differently.
What story or memory can you think of in your leadership journey that would best kind of encompass this?
I would say, for instance, so when I got to St. Louis School in particular, I think St. Louis School was in a similar situation to St. Francis. Not as difficult, but was not doing quite well.
You mean enrollment down, money,
We were about
or what?
My estimates is that we were probably in the range of about $12 million in debt. Publicly, the number was 7.2 million, but there were other factors involved to reach that 12 million or so. And I remember my first day of work at St. Louis, and the CFO said, I quit and we don't have enough money for the next payroll. So that was my first day of work. And so it was a challenge right there. The person was exaggerating, of course, in that bad of shape.
So they waited till your first day to quit?
Yeah.
And were they vying for the same spot?
Not that person, no. But there were other people that were, had tried for the position. But I got in, and I will tell you, it's not unusual. A lot of schools in Hawaii are struggling, a lot of private schools. And at the time, the schools kind of will struggle and they get better, and they struggle and they get better. But for me, going in there as a non-St. Louis graduate, having to immediately cut about $500,000 from the budget in about 2 weeks, it doesn't bode well, for an outsider to come in and make those kind of moves.
Because the $500,000 were primarily layoffs, or no?
Layoffs primarily, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a leader, you're coming in, and the last thing I ever want to do is let someone go. But it became the difference between having the school at all and saving the jobs that we currently had, or having to make those moves there. So
like an amputation.
In some ways, yes, but I knew it was only temporary.
Yeah.
Because if we could get back on our feet, then we'd be able to ride through. And schools go through these, so it's not unusual that St. Louis was going through that at that time. We all go through our peaks and valleys financially, but we were not in good shape, and not the fault of anyone in particular. It was just the way it is. Catholic schools have been run by priests and brothers that work at no cost. They basically were volunteering their time. And the land, in most cases, was either purchased a long time ago for a good price or given to a particular order that runs the school. So with Catholic schools, they were able for many years to keep tuition at a low rate. And that was fine, especially when there were a lot of Catholics out there. But today, the Catholic population is falling. There aren't priests and brothers out there that are available to work in the schools. So for the most part, you bring in these lay people, they need benefits, they need competitive working salaries. And then the product of that is that tuition goes up. And then you can't serve the same population of people that you always did. And the people that do want to attend your school can't afford to go there. So that kind of has been happening in all of our Catholic schools in Hawaii. And that is why in the last 20 years, we've seen about 10 schools that have closed, from St. Anne's to St. Francis to Our Lady of Perpetual Help. You can go down the list. Cathedral, there are a lot of them out there. And not because anyone was doing anything wrong. It's just because the system itself just didn't work anymore. And so it did take someone like myself and then a group of board members that we worked closely together to kind of really think outside the box and try to find ways to be able to help the school survive. So today we're out of debt. We've gotten rid of that debt. And our enrollment has almost doubled from what it was when I started. And we're in really good shape. But at the same time, we could turn the other way very quickly too. You never know what happens in the future. But we made a nice turnaround, in part because I was willing to make the tough decisions. And I think in Hawaii, we're so close. We're so close. Everybody knows everybody, that it's tough to make decisions, the kind of decisions that I made.
You mean to lay people off?
To lay people off, to cut certain programs, to outsource programs. A lot of things that we did to be able to get in good financial health. But it is what it took for us to get back on our feet again. And I have no regrets making those decisions, because I do believe that one of the things people say all the time, that one of my good friends who was on our board, actually, he was the president of St. Francis Healthcare System. He unfortunately passed away. He's a St. Louis graduate, but he would always tell me, he said, Glenn, you have to find that balance between mission and margin. So that mission is important, and you never want to forget that. And you want to keep laser focused on that. But you also have to take a look at the margin part. You can't have the mission without the margin. And if you're focused too much on the margin, then you're going to lose also, because you have to keep your eye on that mission.
It sounds like you had to come into like a distressed debt situation. Like in corporate America, that's basically, you know what I mean? You have a company that's in trouble, and you almost, they send in a fixer to an extent, right?
Yeah, pretty much that's what I was. Someone from the outside who would come in. It would have been very difficult, I think, for a St. Louis graduate with all the relationships they had to be able to do something like that. Not to say that it couldn't be done, but a lot of it had to do with the people. At St. Louis School, there are a lot of people who bleed. We say bleed in red and blue. They're very passionate about the school. And there is no way I could have done what was done as a leader of the school without those individuals. People like Walter Dodds, people like Tony Guerrero, who unfortunately passed away, people like Dwight Otani. These are people that bleed red and blue, that were there making sure that the school stayed afloat. And those are the real heroes. I was just kind of there to kind of orchestrate things and make some tough decisions. But those people behind the scenes are the ones that really made it happen.
So like maybe what's something that people can share, but that people don't commonly know that they had to do in order to make this thing last?
Well, there are a lot of examples of people that really kind of stepped up to the plate to help us. One of them was the Alumni Association at St. Louis School, which is a separate entity from St. Louis School. So they're their own organization.
It's the clubhouse, right?
It's the clubhouse. It was started by a parent that wanted to have an organization to make sure that the alumni are working together, but also to support the school. And it's a separate organization. And that organization started because a parent donated a piece of land and a building in downtown Honolulu. And then, of course, that was sold. And then they purchased the Eisenberg property, and that burned down. And then they created the current place that is there now. But, I mean, it's no coincidence that there's a First Hawaiian Bank right next to the Alumni Association. I mean, and I tell Walter Dodds that all the time. I said, hey, I know that's a nice little corner on the street, but at the same time, that lease that First Hawaiian Bank has there supports the clubhouse. And so it's a win-win scenario, right? And as CEOs, you want to look for that. But those are the kind of things that happen behind the scenes that not everybody knows about. But there are people like Walter Dodds who are making moves behind the scenes so that the Alumni Association can be supported, but then also so that the Alumni Association can support the school.
Does the Alumni Association make a lot of money?
From that lease, yes.
Oh.
Yeah, on a yearly basis, as would any company that owns land that leases out the property.
What's the effect of Mariota and Tagovailoa on the schools, enrollment and so on? How much did that help?
I think that was a massive effect in terms of Marcus. Tua is definitely making a positive impact, but Marcus in particular made a huge impact because his popularity came when we were at our lowest low in terms of enrollment and in terms of finances. So it was a nice positive spark. And the beauty of Marcus is that he's one of the nicest human beings on the planet. He's just so good to the core. And he's the perfect example of what we say at St. Louis we want to build, which is St. Louis gentlemen. People that not only care about themselves, but also care for the community. So he has his Motivate Foundation, and he's constantly going out there and doing good things. Of course, he won the Heisman, and just, First Hawaiian Bank, no coincidence, right? Take him on as the person they're working with. And he's just a wonderful example. And I think people look to him. So on the outside, people would look at Marcus and say, I want my kid to go to St. Louis because I want them to be like Marcus in terms of just the human being that he is. On the other hand, you had students who looked at Marcus and said, hey, he was in a lot of AP classes. He's not your typical person that just wants to go to school for athletics and that's it. And we've seen that on our side. If you take a look at a lot of our athletes, a lot of people don't know that these athletes have 4.0 averages, 3.8. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they were looking at Marcus and saying, if he can do it, then I can do it too.
I think I heard that Kamehameha Schools also has something with you guys.
Yeah, so one of the first things we did was when I came to St. Louis School is how do we get things turned around? So we outsourced different areas to save money, but also to create efficiency. In some cases, we actually spent more money to outsource, but the efficiency ended up saving us in the long term. Another move that we made is in my second year as president, we opened up our elementary school. It's not a big elementary school, it's just a small one with one different section per grade level. And that really helped to boost our enrollment. We went up about 200 somewhat students in just 1 year after creating the elementary school. And the reason is because it wasn't only the elementary students, but also their brothers and their other family members that would come to the school. The thing with St. Louis School and with Sacred Hearts and some of the other single gender schools is that we're really only working with half the population. So enrollment is an extra challenge for single gender schools. So the first step was some of the things we talked about, the outsourcing,
Like, what did you outsource?
but the second we outsourced the cleaning of the rooms, the landscaping, a lot of different things.
Mhm.
But what we also did was we started the elementary school. And then right after that, we realized that St. Louis School has a great history of having Native Hawaiians there. St. Louis School was started in 1846. So Punahou in 1841, St. Louis in 1846. The only older school is Lahaina Luna in 1831. So those are the three oldest in Hawaii. I noticed immediately when I came to St. Louis School that there was this thread of Hawaiian culture at the school. Very natural. It wasn't anything. It was very authentic. And so as a former history teacher, I did a little work and looked into it. And St. Louis School was around before Kamehameha Schools. And because Catholic school is affordable, a lot of Native Hawaiian families did find a way to have their kids go to St. Louis School, which was called Ahuimana College when it started on the windward side. And then eventually moved to where downtown, where we have College Walk, which is named after St. Louis College, which is the second name it took on, right where American Savings is currently right now. And then we ended up moving to Kalaipahaku. But for those first years before Kamehameha Schools was around, St. Louis School was a school where a lot of Native Hawaiians would attend. And that thread has continued. And a lot of the things that we do, I came to St. Louis School, I saw people chanting before they walked into the classroom. I see people speaking Hawaiian. And I'm looking around, I'm thinking, hey, this is a little bit more than what I've seen elsewhere. And then I come to find that at the time, our population was about 53% Native Hawaiian. So that's pretty significant. So we brought in Kamehameha Schools to have them take a look at what's happening. And for most private schools, there's a program called Kipona. And Kipona program usually helps students who are Native Hawaiian who would like to attend private schools because...
Like Kekipuahi?
Well, there are a lot of different programs out there. And fortunately, the CEO, Jack Wong, is an amazing leader and wants to help as many Native Hawaiians as he can. So he branches out and has a lot of different programs. But Kipona was the program for all private schools, and Hawaiian families would be funded about maybe between $7,000 to $10,000 a year to utilize that to help defray the cost for private school. And at the time, I had heard through the grapevine that Kamehameha was trying to look for a new program to help the kids that would also provide a little bit more accountability. So if you were Native Hawaiian, you applied for it, you would get the help, but they were willing to give up more money if the students could show that they're making progress and things. So anyway, we had to visit the school, and after they saw the amount of students that we do have and also the amount of students that we have that are really at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, actually, thanks to the fact that we have an endowment at the school, a collection of endowments that provide scholarships for our students to go to school. It's not as much as we need, but it's there, and we have one. And because of that, a lot of those scholarships were serving Native Hawaiians. So when Kamehameha Schools said, take a look at that, they said, hey, you know what? We want to help you. And they want to help some other schools also that also serve a significant Native Hawaiian population. So we've been funded a scholarship through a special program at Kamehameha Schools that really helps a lot of our students each year. And so it's been truly a blessing. We don't know how long it will last. We don't know. But so far, I think we're in our 7th year now of it, and it's been just excellent. It's made a big difference. And I think that we've shown at St. Louis School that we do help our students get from one point to the other, and that we're making a difference in their lives.
You know, with your music career, so you have platinum, you have gold,
Yeah.
and so on. So like how many of each? Do you know?
When you get a gold record or platinum record or bronze record, it's something that you can get a lot of very quickly just with one hit.
Oh,
So I tell people that all the time. Like, I have a lot of gold records, but just from one song, and
how
then
does
I
that
have,
work?
because what happens is the records are based upon where it's being sold. So the United States, when I was singing in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, a gold record was, if you sold 500,000 records, you would get a gold record.
Oh,
If you sold 1 million records, you get a platinum record. But that same song, if I were to release it in Germany and it became a hit in Germany, 200,000 is a gold record, and maybe 250 and 500,000. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's right around there. And Germany is a pretty big market. You could go to Portugal, per se, and have a gold record with 20,000. So it all depends on the population of people and the amount of records that you sold. So I have lots of gold records. They're all kind of hanging out all over the place. I didn't order them. They just, whenever I went on tour, as part of a promotional tour, they would say, "Hey, Glenn, here's a gold record. It's got the stamp on there to show that it's legitimate." And they'd give it to me. I put it in my suitcase, take it home. If I wanted to have 1 million, a ton of gold records, I could actually go out and try and get them certified. But, it's pretty much just a showpiece out there. Yeah.
I think I was asking that because I was trying to explain it to my kids, like who Glenn Medeiros was back in the day.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is Bruno Mars before Bruno Mars. I mean, he was like number one at the top, and like, who's that? So the thing I'm wondering is, I mean, to hit that pinnacle of success, right, in the music industry, which is arguably super hard.
Yeah.
Like, you think that was harder, or you think leading St. Louis is harder?
Well, both are difficult.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what helped me prepare for this job. I would say leadership is probably harder because the music industry is tough, very tough. But unfortunately, a lot of it is based on luck. It really is. Being at the right place at the right time. Now, you have to be prepared so that when that opportunity comes, you can take advantage of it. But a lot of it, for me in particular, and for a lot of artists that I see out there, I mean, there were so many artists I met that were so much more talented than I was, but just didn't make it for whatever reason. It wasn't the right timing. It could be a lot of different things. There were a lot of artists that, on the other hand, could barely sing, but they did really well. So you never know.
You mentioned luck, right? So can you share a story about your luck?
So my luck was entering the Brown Bags to Stardom Talent Contest, winning that, recording a song that I didn't want to record. I actually sang Nothing's Gonna Change My Life For You at the talent contest because I was a huge fan of George Benson. Loved his work, loved his playing of the guitar and his singing. And I really liked one of his writers, one of the writers that would write for him, Michael Masser, had written a lot of hits for a lot of people, Diana Ross, Whitney Houston. And so I would listen to George Benson's records, sang the song, but after singing the song and winning the statewide championship here, I was asked to do a recording as part of the prize. And I said, let's find a song that I could sing. And it was lucky because the program director at I-94 at the time, his name was Jay Stone, and he had a really good ear for music. And he said, Glenn, I think you should re-record That's Going to Change My Life For You. And I said, no, that's George's song. I'm not doing that. He said, no. And he had a reason for it. He said that Whitney Houston, a few years earlier, had re-recorded Greatest Love of All, which was written by Michael Masser and recorded by George Benson. But Whitney ended up moving it to a larger audience. He felt I could do the same thing. And I said, no, my singing is nowhere close to Whitney, or I don't have that kind of backing that Whitney had. I wasn't signed to any major recording label like she was with Arista Records and Clive Davis. But he said, no, I think you should sing this song. So I reluctantly did. So that was the first piece of luck because I've sung it in about 30 countries. There's something special about that song, whether it's the hook, the rhythm, the lyric, the combination thereof. The music was written by Michael Masser and the lyrics was written by Jerry Goffin. Now, Jerry Goffin is probably one of the most successful lyricists of all time. He's written a ton of hits. He was married to Carole King. They wrote a lot of the lyrics to her hits and wrote a lot of hits for everyone. So this Jay Stone really knew what he was doing. He knew it. He'd been in radio. He listens to songs all the time. So anyway, The first piece of luck was choosing that song, recording it. The second piece of luck was that Jay Stone had a friend in Arizona. He gave the song to us and said, hey, can you try and just play on the radio, see what happens? And it goes to number 1 on request. And at the same time that the song is being played in Arizona, a person named Lenny Silver, owner of an independent record label, is vacationing there. Hears the song, and he had a small record label, but he was a very successful distributor of records throughout the East Coast. He heard it and said, I never heard this song before. He called the radio station and he said, what's going on with this? Is he on a record label? They said no. And like a week later, he flew me to San Francisco and I signed a contract with him to be on his independent record label. So him being there on vacation in his vacation home at the same time as it was played. So there's another stroke of luck right there. And then he was very well connected. So another thing that happened, so Nothing's Gonna Change My Love For You was released in Arizona. And then under the independent record label, he tried to release it throughout the United States, but didn't have the power of a major recording label. And so it was difficult for us to get it played on the radio stations, even though when it did get played, it got positive reaction. So it just so happens that one of Lenny's artists on Amherst Records was Doc Severinsen. And he got together with Doc Severinsen and said, hey, can you get Glenn on The Tonight Show? And he said, oh, yeah. I think it would be great if he sings and we play the music and we do it live. At the time in the 80s, a lot of the performances were pretty much lip-synced. It's not because anybody was trying to cheat or anything. It's just that to get a good sound system on television and make it sound good, it's not easy. And a lot of TV stations don't want to deal with that. They just want to shoot it visually. So anyway, went ahead and said yes. And when I performed on The Tonight Show, I thought that I would just sing and leave and that's it. But when I did go and perform, I think because everyone saw this 16-year-old kid is singing a song, you got a standing ovation. And so we were shocked. And then we were told that he's not going to call me up to the chair. He only does that if he really likes the performance or likes something. Next thing you know, he calls me up and then he starts talking with me a little bit and saying how the Koa bowl that we got for him that was created in part through help of the mayor at the time of Kauai and all the gifts that he just wanted to say thank you for all of that. And he thought it was funny that my manager was from Buffalo, New York, and I lived in Hawaii, and he was Jewish and I'm Catholic. And he didn't share everything on stage, of course, but in my conversations with him backstage, he shared that he thought it was funny that you had these differences between my manager and I. So that ended up making the song explode. So once I was sang the song in front of millions of people, then the song started to explode and it reached number 12 on the chart. It didn't go to number 1. And Lenny, who was not only the owner of the record label I was under, but also my manager, he had said that if it had been released on a major recording label, he has no doubt that it would go to at least top 5, but we didn't know. So right after that, we signed to Polygram Records in Canada, and it went right to number 1 under a major recording label. And then it was released in different countries in Scandinavia. The first one was Norway, went to number 1, then Sweden, number 1. Denmark, number 1, Finland, number 1, and it's just going number 1 everywhere else under the push of the major recording label. So he was right that we needed to do that. And that's why I have these different gold records from different places, because it did sell well in most of the countries that it went to. In the United States, it peaked at number 12. But if it had been released on their major recording label in all of the markets at the same time, it probably would have been a top 3 or so song.
So did you lip sync it on The Tonight Show, or you
sang
sang
live? It was live.
Oh.
And so that's one of the reasons why I think people, they gave me the standing ovation. This young kid singing the song live with the Tonight Show band.
Were you nervous?
I was nervous. But once I start singing, I'm okay. We had like a quick rehearsal before the show started. And it was enough to get going. You know, I just prayed. I was hoping I didn't make a major mistake on national television, but it worked out okay.
And then what's something from that experience that maybe you've never shared before, but is meaningful to you?
What was meaningful to me was Johnny Carson and talking to him and him saying how much he appreciated the gifts that the mayor of Kauai put together at the time. And the mayor at the time was a very nice man, and it really wanted to make sure. On Kauai, we're such a small community, so everybody was behind me on Kauai. I mean, everybody said, you know, Glenn's our boy. He's our guy. We're going to make sure he's going to go up. We're going to make sure he's got everything. They gave me all kinds of stuff to give. And Johnny Carson hadn't seen anything in all his years. He said, I don't get gifts like these. And they were Kauai cookies, things that we sell on Kauai. And he was very touched by that. And it was nice to see someone so wealthy and famous to be so down to earth, to be able to take me to the side and talk to me and tell me how much he appreciated the gift. And I did find out later that most people who are very successful are very much like that. Most people are. It's the ones that are kind of either climbing up there and working their way up that might not always have that sense of appreciation that you find with that. But most people that are successful, there is this sense of appreciation and knowing that a lot of luck had to do with it. Especially in the 80s, I don't know what it's like now, but the difficulty in the music industry, the fact that it's a tough life and you're working really hard.
So you were 16 at the time?
I think I was 16 or 17 when I got on the Tonight Show.
And then you're traveling by yourself?
When I first started, my father would come with me in the first 6 months to a year. And I also had a cousin of mine who was a stevedore on Kauai. And so he would travel with me. But after the first year, I told him, I think I got this. And so it was my manager was also the owner of a small label, but a lot of artists on it. He was very busy and he had a distribution company. He owned record stores. So he was very busy. So his son would actually travel with me. And that was pretty much it. I didn't have family with me on those tours.
Did you feel safe doing it that way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I felt safe. So you had Polygram Records and then you had the subsidiary, the labels that fall under them. And it depended. In some countries, it was Polydor Records. In some countries, it was another subsidiary. But each time I went there, they always picked me up. Yeah, they would pay for my meals to eat. They would make sure that I stay in a decent hotel. They would provide interpreters if I needed. At the same time, we worked really hard, though. We worked very hard. I would typically... You have two tours. You have a live tour that's very tough. If you're with a band, you're traveling from place to place. I didn't do a lot of live touring, but I did some. But promotional touring is what I did a lot of, and that was going to one city a day, sometimes one every 2 days, getting there like 4 a.m. because you got to do the morning show. You do the morning show, you eat some breakfast after that, you do a bunch of interviews, and from about maybe 2 to 5 o'clock, you get some sleep in the room. In your hotel room, you get up, you eat dinner, and then you perform at some kind of show that is being sponsored by the radio station that you're there to promote, because everything at that time was about getting it on radio. You had to get the song heard. And so it was, I do you a favor, you do me one. So not payola, not all that stuff. I mean, that happens. But it's, if you perform for us at this, let's say if I-94 had some special thing at, we're going to have this party down at this club, then they'll say, and Glenn Medeiros will be there. And if they feel that it can attract people there, then that's kind of like a give and take scenario. And they'll be more likely to play the song. It's like a trade.
Kind of trade.
Yeah, it's like a trade. And I think that's a win situation. I think that's a good thing. Yeah. And so we would do that. But when the song is new, we'd go to smaller stations. So we'd be going to these little towns in the middle of nowhere. It's like corn as far as you can see, or grain, whatever it is. And then this little town, and then a little club that you perform at, a little hotel in the middle of nowhere. And you just do that on a daily basis, getting up early every morning, and it beats you up. And you get to get on a small plane, travel to and from. And then you start with the lower level radio stations, then you go to the higher level, the bigger market. And if you're performing for top radio stations in the United States, you've got a hit for the most part.
So was it worth it to do all that?
The learning experience was good. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't getting paid during those times. So you get paid for live tours, but promotional tours you don't. So it wasn't like I was making a lot of money.
So how do you eat and everything then?
Well, they take care of the cost in terms of the hotel and food, but not
kind of
every,
like free
not
talent
every meal.
almost, right?
In some ways, and but that's the cost you have to pay to become popular nationwide. If you're living in a state like Hawaii and you can go back home and work another job, and but it's different if you're trying to get your song out there. I feel that anytime my name is mentioned, even in the same sentence with Bruno Mars, it's a real honor, because I don't know how people realize how incredible his career has been. Because in the music industry, to get to that level, it's not just luck. You got to know what you're doing, and you got to have a lot of talent. In the music industry, what I try to tell young people is that singers just recently started working together to get their rights and to get paid. And so I get paid as a singer now, whereas I didn't in the past. But because people have been working to make sure that singers, so what would, this song be if it weren't sung by this singer? That's an important thing. And so we got to protect that. So now with satellite radio and these new different avenues for music, singers are finally being recognized and being paid for their performances. That wasn't the case when I was in the industry, but writers unionized very early on and made sure that every time a record was played, every time a record was sold, they get paid from the first record. In terms of singers, it was so difficult to get records to become successful, and it's so expensive at the time to go into a recording studio and get it done, that records companies had the right, and this is really just a part of the market, right? They would say, hey, we'll spend $100,000, $200,000 for creating your record, but you're not going to make any money as a singer until all that is recouped first. So what ends up happening with a lot of singers that they do 3, 4, 5 records, and each record they're down $200,000. They go on a live tour. Live tours most of the time don't make any money, or they break even unless you're extremely popular. So then you're breaking even. And then when you travel, I mean, you go on any trip, right? Even if the meals are paid for and everything, you still have to come up with more money for tips and other things.
So why do it then? I mean, it's just for the love of it, or you get
two reasons why.
attention?
I think you do it because you want to make a living doing what you love. I think that's the most important thing. A lot of people think it's for attention. I don't buy that. I mean, some people want attention. Maybe that's a nice byproduct of it. But I really do think even the teenagers like I was, that just, granted, fame is wonderful, but we just wanted to make a living doing what we do. And if people like it, great. And the unfortunate part is that when you go out on tour, most musicians you meet will say they lost a lot of money, they didn't really do much, and the record company made all the money. And I think that's true for the most part. I also think it's true that a lot of record companies lost a lot of money with artists. But what I don't like about the music industry is that if you work really hard in the music industry and have all these people out there, live your dream. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't do what you believe you can do. I've seen so many people get burned for that because they didn't have a plan B. They didn't have a second option. They just put everything into singing and was left with nothing afterwards. And so maybe I'm a little too pragmatic. I don't know. But what I've done, like my daughter sings. And I told my daughter, I said, look, I'll pay for an apartment for you to go to LA and New York and do it. And you go up there and do your best. But you need to get your degree first. You need to get a degree. You need to open your mind. You need to learn about the world around you. You need to develop a skill other than singing and music. And then go out there. And then when you come across a record deal that you don't want, you say, I'm sorry. I wasn't in that situation. So for me, after Nothing's Going to Change My Love for You, I was signed to MCA Records in the United States. And they said, hey, what kind of record are you looking at doing? I said, well, I'd like to continue with what I've been doing, which is love songs, and kind of do something maybe like some pop rock, which is did a little bit like a Richard Marx type sounding stuff, which is what I was doing previously. And they kind of looked at me and said, well, if you want to do that, then you're going to have to find another recording deal. And I just purchased my own house on Kauai, that I didn't buy it cash. I didn't have enough to do that, but I put a down payment on it. And I was in a tough situation. And they basically told me, hey, look, your music that you're doing, it's of yesteryear. It's done. Like, we're either doing, right now it's grunge or it's hip hop, one of the two. And the person I spoke to at the label said, look, you can do a hip hop record or you don't have a deal. And so I kind of caved in, honestly. I just said, you know what? I'll give it a whirl. I love listening to R&B music. That's nothing. I love it, but I've never really kind of performed it and do some singing of it, but not hip hop anyway. But anyway, I went through with it. And the weird part is, with the power of a recording label behind you 100%, Bobby Brown was on the same label, MCA Records. One of the people at the recording label, after we had recorded the song, said that, hey, it would be great to have Bobby do the rap on his in-between records. And my manager, again, very good friends with Rick James, who lives in Buffalo, had me meet with Rick James. And he said, hey, I know, Rick James is kind of like a god in the R&B community, very well respected. And he basically got Bobby on the phone. He said, hey, Bobby, I want you to work with Glenn. And
Like you were there when he made the call?
Yeah.
How did that go then? You were set up with this meeting with Rick James?
Yeah, I went to his house with my manager. It was in Buffalo where my manager lived. And we went in there, and really nice guy. And he had I remember a big desk. It almost looked like a CEO's desk. Very dark room. I'm sitting in there, and he was dressed very casually and just a really nice guy. Hey Glenn, what are you working on? Da da da. Here's what I'm doing. Da da da. I heard your records. That he did his homework. He listened to stuff, and he says like, hey, and he was good friends with my manager, and he said, you know what? My manager just so happened to be a guy that there are a lot of R&B artists that were signed to his record label. I'm trying to think of some right now, but the Stylistics were one of them. And so the relationship was there. He got Bobby on the phone, and next thing you know, Bobby was flying to LA from Atlanta to go and do the rap, write a rap for it and for the song. And then as soon as MCA Records got it, I saw the power of what it means to have a major recording label say, we're going to make this a hit, because I don't know how quickly it was, but before he knew it, it hit number one. I mean, just really quickly. But in retrospect, my career was mainly based in Europe at the time. And I think it sent the wrong message to a lot of my fans that were in Europe to say, like, looked like a little bit of a sellout. Like, why is he going from love songs and to hip hop? And
so you had a channel conflict.
I think so. And so what I do tell people all the time is I tell them that try to get your education first. Have something to fall back on so that you don't have to make any decisions you don't want to make.
But you're 16. How are you going to do that?
So here's the exception to the rule. The exception to the rule is that if you get lucky enough as I was, then you take that route. Yeah, I had no choice but to take it, right? You don't sit back and say, I'm not going to go on the Tonight Show and I got to go get an education. No, you strike, right, when the iron's hot. And so I did that, and that was the right thing to do. But the chances of that happening is so minuscule, right? So for most people, it's go and get your education, expand your mind, you work on learning to play the guitar, the things, work on your songwriting skills, work with other people who are like-minded, and then go out and try and get a record deal. To me, that's the best path to take, because what happens with a lot of youth, and I can say as I was called a teen idol, right? And teen idols get a real bad rap. They're often called, one-hit wonders, or it's just a pretty face. But I think if you take almost any artist, anyone, even some of the most brilliant artists, if you look at them when they were teenagers and you watch them sing, they didn't have it together when they were young. Like, there aren't too many Michael Jacksons and Stevie Wonders out there. Like, that most people take time to find their sound. I mean, even if you look at Bob Marley, look at some of his early stuff. He was doing some very different music from what he ended up doing later. It took time for him to get to that point. And of course, I still think of Bob Marley as a genius, but sometimes you have to develop your skills and
so
develop a sound to come into your own. And I think what happens with a lot of teen artists is that you're constantly doing interviews, and the people doing the interviews are saying, so what is this? Like, are you really a musician? Or are you just a pretty face? Or what's going on here? And a lot of teen idols will get a lot of attention first because it's a cool song. They look good. It's a new thing. But then when you're constantly berated by people that are focusing on your negatives, it causes a reaction from the teen idols. And I think that's why a lot of them, you see their image change, but it doesn't change all that naturally. A lot of times when I watch these artists, they take a hard change.
Like a reaction to fit in, or a reaction to be like up yours?
I think both, actually, right? So some, I won't mention any artists, but like you have one artist that might be like really known as like the girl next door, the guy next door, whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden they're doing videos that you're like, what?
And this is what I'm wondering, is that like predators and so, you know what I mean? Like maybe they got traumatized at some point too, and then you have a big switch. No?
I don't know. I think the big switch in many cases, in my opinion, from what I've seen, is that I think sometimes as artists, when we get into survival mode, that's when you get a reaction. If you corner someone, then you're going to get a bad reaction out of it. And I think when you're in the music industry and all of a sudden you're making money and you don't realize that as soon as you make that I would get $100,000 check, not knowing that $50,000 that you're going to go to taxes. So don't spend that $100,000. You might want to spend $5,000, and then you don't know when that next check is going to come. So you're in a situation where even if you're popular, you're making a lot of money right off the bat, like not a ton of money, but in little, 50,000 here, 20,000 here. I'd sing for like 20 minutes and make 50,000. and then not make any money for the next month. So this false perception that you're actually doing really well, but you're not. And one thing I've always done is I always, every year, paid my taxes. I would hear the stories about people getting into trouble. So every year I took it to the accountant every year. And every year at the end of the year, I was left with pretty much nothing. So you're in that situation where you're trying to survive. You're successful. You're seen as being successful. So what do you do? And what I've seen a lot of people do is they have side businesses and to make the money. In some cases, when I was doing a lot of hip hop music, a lot of them were selling drugs on the side. Some people think, oh, they're just caving into drugs. But no, sometimes it's because it's an actual business and they're trying to survive. And it allows them to continue to live this high lifestyle. And in some cases, you have people like myself who really was just looking to survive. And if it meant that I had to try and sing a different style of music, then, hey, you know what? I like listening to R&B music. I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not doing anything illegal. I'll give it a whirl. In retrospect today, I should have done it. I mean, I'm glad I met Bobby. I'm glad I got to work with all these people. I'm glad. But that wasn't what I wanted to do musically.
So if you could do it again, you would say no.
I would have said, you know what? I'm going to go to another label. I'm going to look for another deal.
Or I'm going to ask Bobby Brown to do grunge.
I mean, yeah. No, I think, I don't know what would have happened if I would have said no. Maybe they would have said, okay. Maybe if I had bargained, they might have said, okay, we'll work with you. But I think they were pretty much done with me, though. I think from about 1987 to about 1991, 92, the people really started moving away from the male artists that sings love songs. It's just moving away from that. And so I didn't think that I had any bargaining power. But who knows what would have happened? I don't know. I started developing my writing skills right about 20. I could have maybe done what Bruno Mars did, and maybe I could have lived in LA, which I didn't want to do. I didn't want to leave Kauai. I love my home. But so that was another thing that maybe might have contributed to me moving, out of the music industry. But if I had moved to LA and started writing songs from other people, because writing is where the money is at in music, because of the protections that are there, that makes the artist a lot more attracted to the label, because now they can not only make money from the singing part, they'll also make money from the catalog and from the copyrights. So Bruno, I don't know his story, but from my perspective, it seems like he became a popular writer first, and that got his foot through the door. And then, of course, he ended up recording his own records and then just, exploded.
For somebody who's been in the industry, like yourself, when I look at people like Bruno Mars or Michael Jackson, they write their own. Yeah. I don't know if Michael did, but they're like those guys, they write their own music. And then they perform it. Yeah. Like, how hard is that? So
as far as writing music is concerned, this is where I think the importance of going to college and opening your mind and having an education is really there. Because I think for me in particular, I needed to see other people write before I could do it. When I started writing, everything sounded like something else. And I didn't realize too that you just can't sit down and say, I'm going to write a song today. You have to be inspired. You have to find a way to capture that inspiration either in writing or in recording, and then kind of leave it there and then come back to it when you're inspired again and ready to kind of develop it. I needed to see somebody do that. Once I saw the process, I was creative enough and talented enough to be able to write. And then once I did, 200 songs later and different publishing deals later, I wrote a lot of songs. But by the time I started writing, the height of my career had already passed us. But writing is something that I think is extremely advantageous, and almost not just advantageous for any artist, but I think it's almost required. And the reason is because if you're a singer, and let's say after winning Brown Bags, I wanted to sing a song, there's very little chance that I would ever get a really good song to sing, because the best songs, the A-list songs, are going to go to the big times, right? So if you're starting new, how are you going to find a song? So it was brilliant in some way for me to do a song that had already been recorded, because it's probably the best song I'm going to get. The beauty about writing is not only the fact that you make yourself as an artist worth more, but you can create songs that are custom made to your voice, like custom made. So you're not going to go out of a range that, Bob Dylan, most people would consider a genius. But you watched that special recently about the making of We Are the World. And if you watch that series, he's on there and they give him a line to sing and he doesn't know how to sing it. And he didn't write it. It wasn't custom made for his voice, because he's so used to writing songs in his range, doing kind of working out the way he wants it to work out vocally. It literally took Stevie Wonder to go on the piano and say, hey, here's how you would sing this line like Bob Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. But he was able to do that, and it shows, they actually show that happening on video. So that just goes to show you that the power of writing is tremendous, not only financially, but also in terms of an artist. You can express yourself. You can write about the things that you're really passionate about. You can write the music that fits your range, fits your abilities. That's really important. So that's why I also feel that going to college is important, because you go to college, it opens your mind to different things. You start to see different things. You start to connect different things, and you start to write about them. And you're exposed to more things. So I don't know. Everybody's going to have their own path, but that's what I think.
So do you have a story that it shows where some of the things you brought from the music side mix in with the leadership side?
Well, one of the most obvious examples of that is when I first came to St. Louis School. I tried to think of a way to get some marketing out there. And so I was very inspired. I was so overwhelmed these St. Louis graduates are some of the most amazing people I've ever met. And I had never attended private school myself. So as a public school from K to 12, I did work at Mariota School for 8 years, and I had experienced what that was like. It was very intense being at an all-boys school, and the passion that the people have for it and the undergraduates. I was so overwhelmed that I ended up writing a song about St. Louis and got all the kids to sing on it, got some of the alumni to come back. And we did a kind of like a We Are the World of St. Louis, and we put it out there. And that was one of the first times that I said, okay, you know what? My musical side is really helping me. And so I think as a leader, there are all kinds of CEOs out there, but CEOs in general, from my experience, number one, they have to protect the brand and protect the people. So the brand of the company, protect the people. That's your number one job. So safety, protection, image. But the other part is the mission. And then above and beyond those two things, finances is really important. And then marketing is very important. So if you take a look at a lot of CEOs, a lot of them come from their former CPAs. A lot of them are lawyers on the protection side. You have the CPAs on the financial side. And then you have business people that have become CEOs. I feel like because of my experience, owning really my own business from the age of 16 to 24, if I didn't go out and get business, I didn't have food on the table. So I know what it was like to kind of run my own business, to market myself. The experience that I didn't have, I had the educational side to be a leader of a school with my doctorate degree, but I didn't have the financial side. So as leaders, it's important for us to know what our strengths and what our areas for growth are and where do we need help. So it's very important for me on my side to have the right financial people there to help make the changes that I need to make. But I would say in terms of music setting me up for my success in leadership, a lot of it was the marketing side. A lot of things that we did, whether it was the music videos, whether it was taking a look at social media and how we use that. And I think when I came to St. Louis School, everyone was kind of afraid to brag about the school. And I said, hey, let's brag. Because on the outside, everyone, no matter what the organization is, people have their own perception. In the case of St. Louis School, they're like football, right? Football, championships. That's a part of what we are, but that's not all of who we are. And we're proud of our football tradition here, and I love it. I love football myself, but people, when they dig deeper, there's a lot more there, so that we have to kind of get that word out. And in as much as we get that word out, we cannot compete with Marcus and Tua, on the news all the time. So it's difficult to kind of get to compete with that, but we try our best. But no, people don't see the fact that St. Louis has probably one of the best robotics programs in the United States, not just Hawaii, and that they don't see that we're the only school in the United States that has a Civil Air Patrol, JROTC, and Scouts program all in one school. So we have leadership opportunities from K to 12 at the school. They don't see the INA-based learning that's happening at St. Louis, all the things that we're doing with Palolo Stream, all of the things that we're doing to bring back some of the indigenous plants. To my understanding, the only school that provides Samoan language in all the private schools, and possibly even public schools. But there's so many things that we do. I could go on and on, but there's so many things that we can do, that we do now, that if people knew about it, they think, wow. So as a president and as a former singer, I think my ability to want to market those things has helped us.
So what's something that would be surprising for us to know about you that is not commonly known?
I'm a bit of a jokester. I like to joke a lot. I like to have fun. And so, when people sometimes they get a little surprised with that. I mean, not joking in that I'm not sarcastic or hurtful to people, but I make fun of myself for the most part. And a lot of people don't know that I play tennis quite a bit. I'm not the greatest tennis player in the world, but I do compete in the USTA on the weekends. And I've been doing that for many years. So I often get a double take, when I'm playing against someone else. Oh, you're Glenn. Oh, you look like that singer from the 80s. Oh, I am that person. So some people are surprised that I love football. I did play football prior to going to high school for many years, and then throughout Pop Warner. And when I started at Kauai High School, my freshman year, I'd asked if I could, be on the team. But if you don't mind, I'm performing from time to time. And the coach was like, no, you're either all in or not. So it was tough for me to see a lot of the kids that I used to start in front of playing, on the starting team. And I used to love playing on offense and defense. And I wasn't great. I was average, but I held my own and I loved it. I love playing football. So I play fantasy football. I love watching football every Sunday. I invite my friends over to my house and we watch different games. And so I'm a big football fan. So in some ways it works that I'm at St. Louis because I do appreciate football and what it can do. I appreciate it for the art that it is. It's a beautiful thing to see when it's done well. At the same time, I appreciate what it can do to change people's lives, just like the music industry changed my life. For a lot of people, athletics is their avenue to help them and their families kind of move up the social ladder.
I think I heard you say when you were a child, you're dropped or something?
Yeah. So my mother was pregnant with me. She was working as an assistant to the cook and she fell, went to the doctor. The doctor had been a doctor for quite a long time. He said, look, you're going to lose this baby. I'm sorry. And just be prepared for that. And then she went back to the doctor like a week later. And he said, according to him, that it was a miracle, that everything had healed itself. And both my parents are Catholic. But after that happened, my father was literally going to church almost on a daily basis in the morning before you go to work. And we had always been strong Catholics, but it just got escalated at that point. And I had always felt in my heart that it was a miracle that I was here. And my mother would always remind me of that. And sometimes still does today, that God had played a role in me being here. So when I started teaching, I started actually in Mililani Middle School. And I had chosen to teach in public school because I felt that's where more people needed to be helped. And I had experienced my education in public school also. But when I started teaching there, I started finding myself wanting to pray with the kids. And I was reminded about the fact that when I attended public school, I had a core group of friends, my best friends, that when we were in Koloa Elementary School, we used to get picked up on a bus halfway through on Wednesdays, halfway through the day. And they would take us to church and then we'd go back before. And so even though I was attending public school, the faith was always a part of our school. We used to pray together before we eat. We used to do things together. And we used to every Sunday, we would go to church together. So it was almost like a little bit of Catholic private school in there, but not really. But it took my experience being at public school for a year as a teacher to realize that, hey, something's missing here. So that's when I started looking at teaching at a private Catholic school. And that's when I ended up teaching at St. Joseph School in Waipahu. But yeah, my mother always reminds me that, it was a greater power that allowed me to be here and that I should constantly focus on, giving back. And so being a Catholic school educator for me is one way to give back. It doesn't necessarily mean that I have to give back to a Catholic school in particular, but I do feel a connection, with the church. And one of the things I found out after my dad passed away that was really touching to me is I was born on June 24th and my dad's birthday is on July 4th. And we don't know if it was a coincidence or not, but he actually took me to be baptized on his birthday. You see the connections there, and I'm not one to ignore those things. So yeah, I feel like I've been blessed. Even at St. Louis School, there's so many things that, above and beyond, like I said, the true drivers to the success that we've had have been the people behind the scenes. But I also believe that there's been a greater power overseeing us because there are a lot of things that could have turned one way but ended up going another. So anyway, yeah, that is a story I've shared before with regard to, I think I was doing an interview with the Catholic Church actually, and they had asked me about it. So
can you remember a time or a story where it's like this is why I was granted the chance to live?
Oh, yeah. There have been certain moments that I can remember that I say, wow, I think this is why I'm here. I remember being in Spain. It was one of the first times I had gone on a live tour. And I wasn't popular enough to have concerts in stadiums, but I did have concerts in bull rings, which would have about, 3,000 to 5,000 people. And I remember seeing, and everyone had the lights moving, at the time, I don't think we had cell phones, but, just lighters or whatever it was. And you could feel everybody seeing nothing's going to change my life for you with me. The ability to connect with that many people, at that moment, I felt like, wow, this is why I'm here. I'm connecting with these people. I'm giving them that song there for whatever reason, and it could be different for everyone else, meant something to them, and gave them, whether, the song is a 4-minute escape from whatever they're going through, that I was there for that reason. So that's one thing I can remember. There have been many other moments at St. Louis School when I think that I know that I wasn't the main force behind helping to turn things around, but I do know that I felt like I was the catalyst for it. And so there have been several situations at St. Louis that made me feel that way. There have been other times when I was there for others, when I believed in someone. And that's one of the best things about my position now, is that I'm in a position to be able to make a difference in other people's lives. So you have that story we mentioned earlier about having to make cuts and releasing people and outsourcing. Well, on the other hand, I've had the ability to be able to provide people opportunities to grow in their leadership. And one of the principals at St. Louis School is my former student at Mariota School. She was wonderful. She was a great student. And I remember telling her, I said, hey, one of the things I used to do as a teacher is I would say you can get extra credit if you enter a contest. And if you win the contest, then I'll give you extra credit. And so she entered a contest, won the contest, and she ended up going off to college. The next thing you know, right after she graduates, she calls me and says, I would like to teach at St. Louis. I give her a job. She did incredibly well. And then I started seeing her the ability to be an administrator, and she became a vice principal. And she talked to me. She said, I'd like to do the same thing you did. I'd like to get a degree at USC and get that same doctorate degree. She did that. And she's now the principal of K-8 at St. Louis School. And I like to brag about the fact that she was my student. And she's earned everything on her own, of course. But I did give her the opportunity at least to show that, she was special. And she realizes that. And there are a lot of other examples of that. But that's one of the best things about being a leader, that we can make a positive difference in people's lives.
Would you be willing to sing a little bit of that Nothing's Going to Change My Love for You?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
If I had to live my life without you near me, the days would all be empty. The nights would seem so long. Is that okay?
You know, when you sing that song, who's singing it? Like, Nothing's Going to Change My Love for You.
Yeah.
Who's saying that?
So here's my take on this. I could be wrong, but when you have a program in music like band, and you read the music and you perform it, you're really only reading what's there. The notes are there, you're playing it, and it's telling you go loud here, soft here. So that's one type of talent. And it takes a certain kind of talent to be able to do that. Some people do it really well, other people not as well. Singing is a step beyond that. You notice some singers, if they do covers, their voice sounds really great. And if it's originals, it doesn't sound so good, because they already have the roadmap to be able to know how to sing it and phrase it properly. So some people are just imitating. But if you give them an original song, the voice just doesn't sound special. So I was lucky, because I think George Benson is one of the finest singers, performers that have ever lived, honestly. And I'm not exaggerating that. So he gave me the roadmap to sing it, but I kind of put my own twist to it. And part of it is I sing with a lot of emotion. I try to connect emotionally. But I think I'm still not connecting to a higher power per se. When I'm writing, that is connection to higher power. The writing is a different story. Like, you can tell me right now, sing a verse, and I'll sing it. But if you ask me, can you write a song right now? I can't do it. I could do something, just off the top of my head that would probably sound like a million other songs. That's why I think inspiration is that you're inspired in spirit. You're connecting to a spirit. You're connecting to something.
because when I'm writing, I don't feel like it's coming from me. I feel like I'm just channeling something.
Okay.
And so singing wise, I mean, the greatest singers, the Whitney Houstons, like I watch her sing and she was channeling something. I don't know what she was channeling. I sing and I put my heart and soul into it. But when I'm singing, I'm not channeling anything. I think she was. But when I'm writing, I'm definitely, that is not me writing. It's not. Because if it is me, it's going to sound like every other song. When I'm writing, it's something else. It's channeling something. I don't know exactly what it is.
So how do you elicit that? I mean, that resonates with me too. It's like when I'm watching somebody do something, whether it's performing or so on, it's like art. It could be somebody doing their business and it's like they're channeling that.
Oh,
because a lot of times after they're like, I don't really know how I did that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
one of the things in music that you see, the channeling, I've never been a huge fan of jazz because for me, it's when I listen to people jazz, it sounds like people just kind of showing off. Like, here's what I can do. And I yearn for the melody. Yeah. But I've always admired jazz from afar because when you watch people play jazz, I think they're channeling something because the music is not there for you. It's just like, here's a bed of chords. Now you go do something. Now you can kind of fake your way through it a little bit. You can do variations of scales and whatever you want to do, but you know the difference. When you see somebody channeling something, it's different out there.
it's like, what was that?
Oh my
And it
gosh.
moves, right?
And then Van Halen would say, I played something. I don't know if I can play it again. I can try to play something similar, but he'll surprise himself and say, oh my God, like, wow, how did I do that? Where did that come from? You know, they're channeling something.
So can you remember a time when you really felt clearly that you're channeling?
There were a lot of songs that I wrote that I channeled something, especially the ones that came really quickly, like so much so that you can't write the words quickly enough, and the melody and the words, it's all coming
What
at me.
song would you say?
Several different ones. There's a lot. I mean, I've written a lot of songs.
Or give me some verses, like verses that came through you, and you're
So
like, whoa.
so there is an interesting story. One of the songs I wrote. So I was recording my fourth record, I believe, third or fourth. I've done 8 records. On my third or fourth record, I was in the recording studio. I was in Connecticut, and we needed one more song. And like, wait, we got to have at least 10 songs. We can't have 9. What are we going to do? And at that record, I was writing the songs, co-writing a lot of them. But there was one song that I kind of have a little bit of an idea, and I started playing on the piano, and the producer said, oh, this is great. And I was humming to it. And I said, okay, let me play with it a little bit. So I put myself on the side. I was away from my family. I'm on the East Coast and by myself. I'm in the studio, and it was a perfect moment for me to just let all out, and all the words came out. But the interesting part to this song is it's a song that everybody knows. So the melody, I don't have a piano in front of me, but the melody goes da 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 da. It's a Lion King song, right? It's called Listen to Your Heart. And so I recorded the song, and the lyrics are different. There are those who chase their dreams when others walk away. There are those who live their lives for each moment, for each day. So that was the first, but of course we know what the real lyrics are in terms of the song that ended up coming out. After the song was recorded, I got a call from my manager. This is like a couple years later. Did you see that new movie coming out? Your song's on it. I said, no, there's no way my song's on it. And so we looked into the situation, heard the song. I said, oh my gosh, that sounds really like a song. So they got in 2 separate musicologists to do a study of it. Both of them said 99% that it was copied somehow. So unfortunately, what happened after that was, my attorney said, hey, Glenn, you got to go in. This song was taken from you. I mean, Elton John's one of the greatest writers ever, most talented people ever. There's no way he would want to take a song from me. But we were both on MCA Records in the United States, both on Polygram Records in Europe. And we had met each other. I was at Babyface's birthday party, and he had sat across from me. And we didn't do a lot of talking, but he was there, and we knew of each other. And what the attorneys were trying to prove is that there was access to the music. So definitely was access, because if you were in a record label in the 80s or early 90s, you walk into an office and you just take all the records that they all have holes punched in them to show that they're promotional, and you just take everybody's work. So I had access to all of his songs. And anyway, it ended up almost going to court. It was in the newspaper, New York Times. that, Elton John, and he could have through a deposition, the whole thing. And the whole time I felt horrible because he's one of my heroes, right? But my attorneys were saying, Glenn, this is worth like not just millions, it's a lot. So anyway, it ended up that right before it was going to go to court, supposedly, the Disney came up, because Disney owned the part of the publishing, came up with an audio tape that showed that it was written prior, they think. What I think actually happened, in my opinion, it's so closely to my song. What I think happened is what I think happens with me as a writer. Sometimes you're just listening to somebody's record and you hear it once and you don't realize that it gets imprinted into your head and then it comes out. I do not ever think that Elton John would ever try and steal a song from me. But I do think that there was a chance that he might have heard it, and then it just, when he was in a creative state of mind, that it came out that way.
Or what's the chance that you both were on the same station channeling it?
Well, I've never heard anybody say that, but that could be true too. You never know. But what gives me pleasure in this, though, is some people will think, Glenn, you should fight this thing. You keep fighting it. You go back and you know what? It's not about that. What gives me great pleasure is to know that I wrote a song on my own, music and lyrics, without anyone else helping, that could have been a number one song in the nation, that could have been a great movie that stood the test of time. That alone, that Elton John would even write something similar to what I wrote, is all I need. Like, I am very happy with just knowing that.
Or what would be interesting is if you were tapping into the same intelligence that he's tapping into.
Yeah.
And knowing that you have access.
Until you said that, I never thought of that my entire life. And, that could be a possibility. I think anything is possible. You never know. I mean, I listen to a lot of his music, so it could be that maybe I constructed something that was influenced by what he had written. But the idea of us tapping into the same energy, I think is possible.
Yeah, because if you think about it, right? I mean, I don't know how you structure it, but you say, with your religion and faith, you have God out there, right? Which is an infinite energy and knowledge base, right? So does God, in your opinion, have some boundary?
My knowledge, no.
Right?
I feel that God is love. That's what I feel. And that's why I think, can you feel the love tonight? And my title to my song was Listen to Your Heart. And it was about listening to the love that's inside of you. So I think we were channeling something there.
It'd be interesting actually on that is if that's what's happening is like a heart connection, right? So let's say it's your heart connection into that kind of infinite intelligence and connecting to his heart. Then at the same time, you potentially heart connected to him.
I think anything is possible. I do know this, in my opinion, one of the greatest writers to ever live. And if that did happen, that's wonderful. I mean, I never saw him after all of this happened, so I don't know. I'm sure that he's dealing with lawsuits all of the time with all of his songs. And I'm not a person, if anybody who knows me knows that I do not try to get involved in anything like that. I'm not the kind of person that would do that. But in this particular case, the musicologist said, the 99% chance, we kind of had to move a certain direction. But in retrospect now, I'm glad it worked out the way it did. I am.
Say, why did this happen for me versus like, why did this happen to me? Then what would you say to that?
That's the way I do look at things. I don't look at why this happened to me. I would say there's a reason why this happened. Yeah. How am I going to learn from it and grow from it? I think we have to look at life that way, and it's tough. It's tough.
So if you answered it for this one, what would it be? Why did this happen for me?
In this particular case, I think it happened to help me write more music, because it made me really develop a sense of confidence that, hey, you know what? If you're writing anything remotely close to what Elton John did, then you're on the right track. It's a simple song. I mean, if you look at Elton John, the many songs he wrote, it's a simple song for him. But even if it's simple, still, we wrote something similar.
When you mentioned that the most moving piece that connects your mom falling down to you being born to Spain was the connection.
It was connection, yeah.
Right? The connection then at that point is what? Your heart connection?
It was love. It's love.
Your connection to love, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you go to this one, which is also a connection to love.
True.
How does that theme keep coming through?
I will tell you, and I'll say this again, God is love. Whether, no matter what religious background People have to understand things based upon their culture. In Portuguese culture, everything is the church, and every holiday is connected to the church. And in being Catholic, I feel like I'm connecting to my ancestors. So that's the path I'm taking to God. But I have just as much respect for anyone else, whatever their path is. But I do think we're channeling that same power, that it's a loving power. It's a power that is creative. It creates. And that's why I think in education, if we don't teach our students to create, we're really missing the boat. If we're just teaching them to regurgitate information, we're doing the opposite. We have to teach kids to get to a point where they can create. That's what causes people to be successful in life, to find purpose in life. Those are the people starting their own businesses. Those are the people finding purpose in life when they can create. And even today, if you look at some of the intelligence scales that we have, some of the theories out there, for the longest time, people would say the highest level of thinking is being analytical, comparing, contrasting, thinking in certain ways. But now you start to see this trend where creativity is the highest level of thinking. And I think that's part because we're channeling something higher than even ourselves.
Are you familiar with ayahuasca?
No.
So ayahuasca is like an Amazonian plant medicine. It's basically a ceremony, and then you enter the field and so on. So I had done that in March, and one of the hugest lessons that I had from that was that I experientially felt the entire universe being one channel of love.
Wow.
Everything was love. And then what I realized in it was, I'm love, because I come from this energy piece. So I am love. So it was, the lesson was like, connect to love.
Well, see, it's interesting you say that, because my whole life growing up on welfare and not having a lot, I always felt that the strongest force in every human is their desire to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until I became a parent that I realized that love is stronger than survival, because I would step in front of a train for my kids. So I think people see the powers that come into play on earth. But of all the powers, clearly, love is it. And love is manifested, I think, in creation. And one of the things I've been thinking about in the book that I've been writing now is one of the greatest forms of love is appreciation. I think if we lose our sense of appreciation in life, appreciation for all the beauty around us, appreciation for others, then, as a human race, we're putting ourselves at risk. And I will tell you that I don't know if you see the same thing, but with technology today and in so many ways for everybody to be distracted, I don't see as much appreciation as I used to see it. And as a CEO, it's tough for me too, because I see it at all different levels. And I hope that we can kind of regain some of that in society to appreciate ourselves, appreciate others. But I think there's a lack of appreciation.
So maybe that's kind of your life journey piece, is that, right? The connection back to love.
Yeah.
Because when you said it, right, your mom fell. Your dad went to church every day to pray, right? I'm sure the congregation was praying too, right?
Yeah.
You're connecting to love.
Yes.
Right? What's the song that launched you called?
Right. Nothing's going to change my love for you.
Right? That's why I asked who's saying that, right? Because let's say that it's God saying that to you.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's you saying it to you.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's you saying it to your mom.
Yes.
Or maybe it's, you know what I mean? It's the connective piece that brought you to that, as well as what you felt in Spain and probably all these other performances that you did.
It's true.
And then brings you now back into the song.
It's true.
That you wrote.
I think that you have that dichotomy there, because there was a part of me that was surviving. And when I made the decision to go hip hop, even though I didn't want to, that was a survival decision. If I look back in life and we talk about the lessons learned, the decisions I made because my desire was to love myself and to love others, those were always the right decisions, even when things didn't work out.
Think about this, though. Even if you go kind of against your authenticity, right, to accomplish something, the words in that song, nothing's going to change my love for you.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting one to me.
No, it's true. I thank you for making that connection, though. That's an eye-opener for me. It is, yeah.
Because that's such a good lesson in general. Because think about all those young men that are going through school at St. Louis. Everyone just wants to feel like, I'm okay. I belong.
No, they just want to feel. I mean, I make it a point.
And nothing's going to change my love for you.
Well, yeah.
Right?
And the kids like to joke with me about it because they'll say, "Hey, Dr. Medeiros, nothing's going to change my love for you," But I try to be out when the kids come to school. I try to greet them, and I give them fist bumps, and I say, "Hey, have a great day." And some of them will joke with me, say, "Hey, have a great day, Dr. Medeiros." But the reason for me doing that is just to let them know, like, I care for you.
Yeah.
You have a place that's safe, that's here for you. I'm here for you. That's important for me.
Yeah. That's the foundational key.
Yeah.
To having a safe space.
Yep.
On that, it's a good place for us to conclude. I just want to acknowledge you and thank you for sharing this time with me.
Thank you.
Your journey has been inspirational.
No, thank you for helping me
you.
realize that, though, because I can tell you're very good at what you do, and I've done a lot of interviews, but I've never had someone recognize that. So thank you.
If you resonate with Greater Good Radio, please join our community at www.greatergoodradio.com, where you can get access to exclusive content and offerings. Hope to see you soon.